Well, welcome to July TriEmbed. No people who haven't been here before. Charlie West is back in town, I understand. Welcome back. And we're going to hear from him tonight. Any announcements, things going on that we should know about?
I don't know if anybody made it out to Brick World, but the Lego Brick World was held in the Raleigh Convention Center this last weekend. And there was quite a bit of embedded stuff with Arduinos and Raspberry Pis out there.
I saw something on the news one evening. I saw some blinking lights in a Lego lighthouse or something.
This Wednesday night at the Forge, there will be another face-to-face or mask-to-mask meeting by the TriEmbed Community Project working on the ESP32 plus FPGA. And it will be approximately 7 o'clock. Depending on who you talk to, some people will probably show up at 6:30 so they can yak. I think the official meeting will start at 7 and we'll take notes for when Carl can get there at 7:15. And actually, I shouldn't have said we. I think Paul missed the fact that my wife has COVID and I won't be at the meeting on Wednesday. But some progress has been made to automate the installation process, and there will be some additional dev boards that combine the dialogue mixed signal FPGA, a particular model that's got operational amplifiers and programmable rheostats and various other analog pieces, as well as digital logic, and along with ESP32, we'll have some of those boards available in addition to the ones that everybody else is already using. And
so is this the 0.8 rev of the board, or
no? It's still no. This isn't actually the custom board. We have not revved that yet because we're honestly still finishing testing it. We just got Dialogue is connected with us and is providing some support now, and they just provided Nick with a set of advanced dev boards and that plug into a narrower footprint than the dip boards that we're all using, and there's been a severe problem with the USB connector, which I've gotten to the bottom of. We got some, well, how shall I put this? There's a special place in hell for the people that sell surface mount connectors that don't happen to wet with solder.
Are those the ones I gave you?
Nope, they're definitely not the ones. In fact, I
gave you a couple too, I think.
And I've got those in various places, but I'm pretty sure, well, in fact, I'm 100% sure that I'm using a set that came from Amazon. They came from a company called BYTEW, I think. And I found them on Amazon, and I volunteered to write a little review of those connectors, and we'll see if see if I can arrange that. But basically, these connectors were holding themselves onto the PC board by the solder that was physically against the edges of the connector pins, and then after they would fracture, and I would solder them back on and solder all the signal pins back together. Then I would put blobs of solder on the 4 corners, and that gave it 10 more grams of stress, and they're just unbelievably fragile. So, but now that we've figured it out, we're going to get connectors from DigiKey. I will look at, actually, I need to scrounge through and see if I can find the ones that you gave me, Paul, and do some experiments on those. Have you used them up to this point?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, if they came from a reputable source, chances are they might work better. So that should be a priority, is for me to identify those. I'll send you a good high-res picture and get them matched up and do some soldering experiments with them. But anyway, popping the sack here, the ones that the alternatives to these, we're taking 60 column breadboards, the long solderless breadboards, and putting a inexpensive ESP32 board alongside, or longitudinally with in line with one of the Dialog FPGAs that also plugs into the solderless breadboard, and then connecting them up with jumpers. Those work extremely well, and in
Something
fact,
like
yes,
except
very
the
similar to
CPU
that.
is different, but it's the same idea.
Yeah, and the dev board, that's an Adafruit dev board, and that costs about $18. And I think the ones we're using cost like $4 or something like that. So anyway, just to finish the story, that's the hardware we're using, and when we have more clear requirements and better handle on what our next step should be, we'll be updating the hardware and deciding whether or not to make another standalone board like the one that we've got, which I do not. Unfortunately, I don't have one handy that I could stick in front of the camera. Oh, I don't have my camera on. But anyway, we're also talking about a larger form factor board that has the same functionality. The standalone dev board contains a ESP32C3, which is a single core RISC-V core, which Espressif fully supports. And then it has its own USB interface and the sockets for both the Dialog evaluation dip boards that we're all using, and a narrower form factor where you plug in an adapter like for a surface mount. And there's a surface mount chip holder that can plug in, so you can do work with those without having to do any soldering. Anyway, that's pretty much an update of the project status. We've tripped over a problem with micro DNS that has got us. The installation is not quite as convenient as it should be, but we expect to have that fixed pretty soon, and eventually everything will be in a Docker image, so that the whole software end of things will be should be fall off a log easy. On Wednesday, there may or may not be the opportunity to focus on the dialogue synthesis tool, which is very different from the typical FPGA tools. There's no Verilog or VHDL involved. These are very, very simple devices with order of magnitude, say 6 or 8 or 10 analog blocks and a similar number of digital. And it's a drag and drop interface. It has a built-in simulator, and it's a very, very cool tool. And so there may be some work with that. Rob's got a projector video set up at the Forge so that it should be possible to put the synthesis tool on the screen. Anyway, I kind of went out of turn there, but that's the update on that stuff.
Okay. And the meeting is this coming Wednesday, 2 days.
That's right. Day after tomorrow, at the Forge Initiative. I can put the address out. I'll find.
I haven't seen anything on the Signal channel about that meeting, so I was a little surprised to hear about it.
And I'll bet you're not. Okay, I'm getting ready to get surprised. Are you not part of the alpha test Signal group?
No.
Oh boy. All right. Well, my face is red. That's where everything's been very, very active, and we've just put the high order bits on the league list, group. I'll correct that problem and try to figure out some way. Sorry, go ahead.
I hope you do it by announcing the meeting to the entire group as opposed to just putting me on the proper list.
Yes, that goes without saying. Yeah, okay. And I don't know why. I mean, the face-to-face 2 weeks ago was published, and when we decided to have another one, we should have published something then, and we need a volunteer to handle communication is what we need, because I'm obviously not competent with it, but I'll do something about that.
Hey, Pete, also include Lee Atkinson and the guys at the Alamance Embedded group.
What's that?
That's the little leftover small group from the old Alamance Makers Guild, and they've still been meeting online, sometimes a couple of times face to face, but they would definitely be interested, at least a couple of them, in coming by the Forge Initiative and sitting in on your meeting.
Are they close enough?
Your project. Lee might make the half-hour drive. I don't know about how many of the other guys would.
From Alamance County?
Just the side of Burlington, yeah.
If they can do it in 30 minutes, I'll be impressed. But anyway, send me the contact, and I'll be sure to copy them.
I can't even do it in 30 minutes, so.
I just because some of them are interested in your project, so I wanted to make sure we extend an invitation to a couple of those guys too.
Well, we're still in alpha on this, so
I know.
Yeah, but I mean, we are on the one hand. On the other hand, we're actively looking for other people to connect with it, and so yeah, send me the contact info.
Okay. Other announcements?
I think you saw where I posted a little bit. I don't know if you guys read anything or looked up anything about Embedded World. But some of that info with some of the various vendors within the embedded community were interviewed by Lector magazine. So there's some good videos there, about 20 minutes per vendor. So I put the link up in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, let's go to the problem of the month. So I take a vitamin every day, and I was thinking, I remember to do it maybe 8 out of 10 days, but it would kind of be nice if the days that I forgot, I would get some kind of a reminder. And so that's the problem this month. How might we automate, detect that whether I have or haven't taken my medicine and remind me if I haven't? I hear crickets.
Yes, well, crickets for me, in that I've wondered that many times and have no idea.
Crickets for me, because I think problem of the month is new since the last time I attended one of these meetings. So
We've been doing it for...
And then we brainstorm?
Yeah, we just spend some time brainstorming on something. We've been doing it for probably 3 years, but I guess you've been gone a few years.
About 4, yeah. I guess the immediate thing that springs to mind is if you have one of those pill bottles, you could just have a live video feed of it and be able to check it whenever you want. You could also do a OpenCV setup that detects pills looking into the transparent bottle. And you could have it check against the calendar to make sure it's empty by a particular time of day.
Okay, so camera looking in the compartments.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, you could also just have a trip sensor at the bottom where you could tell which ones have pills in it. Now, this does mean that you have to fill up your pill bottles, but if you stick a contact sensor at the bottom, then it could be tripped if there's a pill in there and not if there's not. That'd be another way to easily automatically check. Depending on the messaging interface you want to use, you could have it ping you if you haven't by a certain particular time.
What about just a simple like ESP01 or something, driving a rotary motor, and then have one of those rotary pill cases and stuff, and that as the door opens on each division, that pill would become available, and of course you can drive a little quickie web interface to send a text to your phone, hey, go take your pill.
I mean, I can set up an alarm every day at 10 o'clock and says, did you take your pill? Right. So that's a very low tech solution. But I'd rather not get a notification on the days that I remembered.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, you could put your bill in some sort of thing where you have to press a button to dispense it.
Yep.
Take it rather than taking out of the bottle. If you can get something that would be able to reliably spit out one pill, then you could just have something that detects whether or not you press that button on a particular day.
Okay.
Question, Paul. Do you take more than one?
I don't. My wife does.
Well, but you use a different pill dispenser, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you only take one, and it's once a day.
Correct.
Okay. It would seem you could sense whether or not there's a pill in the container, and then if it is still there by a certain time that day, send out some sort of notification.
Okay, I mean, I think that's what the camera was doing.
That's actually a fair point. You could have your vitamin bottle sitting on a scale as well, and then just keep an eye on what the weight is, and if it doesn't change that particular day, or you haven't picked up the pill bottle at the very least, do we think it would be a reasonable assumption that you've taken the pill if you picked up the pill bottle?
I think that would be reasonable.
Well, then you could just have one simple contact sensor that sends a notification if you pick it up that particular day. And if you want to get fancy, you could have this analog scale that keeps track of the weight to make sure it goes down compared to what it was at, say, midnight.
Okay. Other ideas? Hey, Richard.
Hey there. Sorry I'm late.
No problem. So we're doing the problem of the month, and it's a pill reminder, something to detect whether you've taken your pill or pills for the day.
Uh-huh.
Paul, you probably want something to work in the psychology of it, that you want to get a small reward when you take your pill, like a smiley face or or something like that that's displayed after you've taken it, and a sad face in red if you haven't taken it yet.
Okay.
What about a phone app that has a take your pill time? And the whole trick is you go take your pill before that app does its thing, and you tell the app you've taken your pill, and you get the smiley face, and you don't get the buzzer. So you've basically put all of the tech into a Android or Apple app that's probably 10 lines of code instead of the other route.
Yeah, I think it's a little more than 10 lines of code, but I mean, that could work. The only thing is you have to actively remember to put it in the phone when you've taken the pill. Otherwise, you'll get a notice regardless, right?
Yeah, I mean, you'll get a note that says two things. It'll say, it's time to take your pills, and by the way, you forgot to do the right thing when you took your pill.
If you've already taken it, yeah.
Right. So it will shape your behavior. You want to get the smiley face and no beep instead of, oh, I've forgotten it again. And I have a feeling that Bill's probably right that it would shape your behavior to the point where you would develop a sense of when the time was, and actually kind of get a feel for when it is. But now I have something that I use that is just a plain beep, but it's really easy to turn off. But it's not. It doesn't actually meet your parameters, so it's not really a solution.
Okay. I'm not as connected to my phone as some people are, and I may or may not have it. I probably never have it in hand when I take my pills.
That's sacrilege.
I know.
Hey, I don't blame you, Paul. I don't always carry the phone around either.
Yep.
Either sitting on an inductive charger or somewhere on the table or something, but it's never on me.
Okay. Other ideas?
Whatever happened with the dust collector?
Oh, I never do solve any of these problems. I just ask them. That's not true. I do solve some of them, but
You
mostly I
done
just ask them.
you did the horse thing. The horse.
I'm working on that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't
He
done
prefers the horse around.
I haven't done the parachuting one, or the long-range sniper one, or but
They sell internet connected buttons, just as something that you can buy, do they not? I'm pretty sure that's an off-the-shelf product that you can buy. So if you just make a cup with your vitamin or bottle sitting on it, then you can just have something that's in the background monitoring that switch, and you'll per activation event key or notification based on that. Should be a pretty simple build.
yep. And my home automation supports dash buttons, and so I could put a dash button near my pills and just remember to press the dash button when I take my medicine.
Yeah, but if your vitamin bottle is heavy enough to trip it, then you wouldn't even have to do that. You could just have a special receptacle for it, and you wouldn't have any extra motions.
So you can modify the cap somehow, I'm not sure how, with two LEDs of different colors, and when the cap is pressed down and opened, you get one color, and before that it's another color. And then it resets at midnight or something like that. Which is a little much for a cap, but nonetheless.
Do you preload a pill dispenser, or do you actually just take it from the bottle?
I loaded into 1 week. I don't know if you saw. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know if you saw the picture or not.
Yeah. I remember seeing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's no longer in the bottle. So the bottle open or close isn't going to solve a problem. It's that pill dispenser that needs to be sensed.
Are there other pills in the pill dispenser, or just the vitamin?
Say again?
Are there other pills in the pill dispenser, or just the vitamin?
For me, it's just the vitamin, but I can imagine a more general purpose solution that would support multiple pills.
The labor savings are even more because you don't need that pill weak pill thing anymore. You don't have to load that if you go with that solution.
I mean, I use it now because it tells me when I've missed, right? I come down on Wednesday and I say, oh, look, I forgot to take the pill out of the container on Tuesday. So if this solution worked, I can imagine not needing the 7-day thing. But, many of these solutions that work for measuring the weight of the bottle and watching it go down also work for measuring the weight of the 7-day pill dispenser and watching it go down.
Yes. If you don't want to, I was just thinking complexity-wise, the toggle switch is a lot simpler.
Yep. And if there were a toggle switch under that, or if I stuck it in a little 3D printed container or something that, I'm happy to know that I pulled it out of the container once a day. Because presumably if I pulled it out, I took it, and I wouldn't pull it out and put it back in and forget to take the pill. With much higher probability than I keep getting muted somehow. I must be pressing the spacebar. Yeah, spacebar puts you into mute mode. Interesting.
It doesn't take you back out either.
No, it does. If you hold it down, and that's kind of a fun mode to have. It's a push to talk.
I think they used to call those cough switches back in the broadcast days.
Yeah, it's a push. Yeah, it's a push to talk, but you can't get out of that mode with the space bar anymore.
That's correct. You
Go
can
in
use
it,
the
but not out.
M key for mute. So M mutes and unmutes. M works the way that you wanted the space to work. But
That doesn't work on me.
oh yes, it does.
No, M key. I'm pressing the M key. Does zip out. Space bar.
It works for me. And the V key mutes your video.
Actually, the M key is toggling the mute for me.
Yes, yeah, that's what it's supposed to do.
Shall we tell Carl that it toggled him off?
Well, I'm on now.
He's on. Anyhow,
Yeah, it doesn't.
And Charlie's sharing his screen. All right, any other comments on the problem of the month?
Nope.
Ultrasonic sensor that detects whether the pill box is there or not. I guess the only problem with that is if you happen to knock it. That's a problem with a lot of these solutions anyhow. If it gets bumped during the day, it makes it look like you took the pill.
Though it's probably the most reliable solution.
As opposed to an LED and the photo transistor on the other side. Just detecting to see if there's a pill in the way.
Or you can just detect whether or not you've opened the lid on the pill box.
Yep.
Assuming you've opened the lid, you've taken the pill. You just have to make sure that loading the pill box at some point doesn't start causing crazy signals to go to the
that's a software issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just the same as what we put another device into programming mode. This is put a device into loading mode.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that'll do it for the problem of the month. So Charlie West was a TriEmbed member several years back when he was at NC State in graduate school. And he was working on a robot for doing deliveries that would drive up and down sidewalks. And he's been in California for a few years and has continued to work on this in the background. He's going to give us an update. Tell us, Charlie, you are back in the area. Is that correct? And what are you doing these days?
We actually moved to Pennsylvania, but yeah, I'm over in Holly Springs now. It's going pretty nice. And in terms of the what's going on, I have a whole presentation if you guys are up for it.
Sounds good.
So I'm working on 3 different companies right now. One's doing a NASA contract on the solar sail material, got a STTR. One is doing D&D art, which is basically generating avatars. It's kind of fun. And then GoodBot is what I've been working on for the last 5 years, more or less. And here's my fancy logo. Hope everyone can see everything okay. So this project has multiple parts. I'm going to start with the hardware.
We're not seeing your screen, Charles. Can you?
Oh, whoops!
Can you run it, share it again?
Guess I missed it so far. Thank you. Let me get this.
There we go.
All right, I can see it. Everyone able to see it?
Yep, works for me.
All right.
Yes.
Slideshow to get going.
Yes, I see it.
I've got a video in there. The frame rates could be pretty atrocious with the current settings, but that's fine. If you want to see the actual video less choppily, just view the presentation. Paul, could you fire up the slideshow? Top right, next to share. There we go. All right, so that's the second slide. So there's multiple parts of the project. Yeah, go back to the beginning. One more. There we go. All right, so this is my fancy logo, my company slogan. And this is an open source project, so anyone can join if they want to. And there are many, many pieces to it. So you to request access. So it looks like Paul can't even play the video either because apparently there's some weird thing with access. Well then, we're just gonna skip the video. Go for it, maybe it'll work. Come on, Google, it's sent by you. All right, so I'm hitting share. It's making you an editor. Use your power wisely. So the first part is called GoodBot Brawn, and that's the hardware part of the project. And the reason for calling it Brawn will become apparent if we can go ahead and see the video. So next slide, if you would. So that's me sitting on it. That's it transporting me quite easily up a hill. So the current prototype is called the Mark III. It has there's multiple slides going into it, but from the outside, in that tower at the front is an IMX 219 camera, which is a fisheye lens camera. So it's streaming video in through that and feeding it to Jetson Nano. It also has a live GPS feed from a U-Box Neo M8N, which is a drone GPS module. And then I constructed the entire chassis out of 1/4-inch high-density polyethylene, and each of those 4 motors is actually a brushless wheel motor, a la what you see on hoverboards. So each of those motors is brushless, and it's not only is it brushless, it's sensored brushless. So as you move around, the Hall sensors give you an idea of your rate of speed and what configuration and which coils you need to actuate. Next slide, please. All right, so once we open up the current prototype, there's a lot going on. So the computations are happening on a Jetson Nano, which was chosen because it's one of the best embedded computers I'm aware of on the market, low-cost embedded computers on the market that will allow you to do actual deep learning stuff at a reasonable pace. Each of those brushless motors has a VES motor controller in the current one associated with it. In the middle, you'll see a 5-volt regulator, which is feeding the Jetson Nano. And then I believe the STM32 microcontroller, which is connected by UART to the Jetson Nano, is getting its 3.3 volts off the regulator from the Nano. That's varied between it and a separate regulator, but I think that's how it's currently going. And then this entire thing is driven by originally 2, but then I dropped it down to just one 12-volt lithium iron phosphate battery, which is 16 amp hours at about 12 to 14 volts. And it can run for a solid 2 or 3 hours on that. Also have an anti-spark switch just for ease. In the later designs, I'm intending to phase that out and basically implement my own. Next slide, please. So the goal here is to try and make a cheap robot that can drive itself around campuses, or basically easy to mod. You give it to GPS coordinate you want it to get through, and it intelligently does that. In terms of cost breakdowns, each of those motors are about $50. The battery is about 80, and then the VES motor controllers are one of the big cost drivers right now, in that they're $80 each, and you need 1 per motor. So that adds up pretty darn fast. The Jetson Nano isn't all that bad. It clocks in at about $60 for the lower RAM size one. And then there's a speaker there at the bottom, which I use for just general diagnostics. And then I have a $15 dev board, nothing too crazy there. And then you'll notice that the camera and the GPS aren't too expensive, but the anti-spark switch is actually surprisingly. So if you total all that up, next slide, you get about $850. But next slide. If you drop out the VES controllers, it drops down to about $529, which I'm hoping for eventual sale price of around $1,000 for these things. Next slide. And so the big cost driver for a lot of this is the VES motor controllers. And it's also coincidentally one of the most irritating maintenance issues I've got. So right now, this right here is a schematic for a brushless motor driver, which I suppose I'll turn on my video for a second. The finished board looks about like this. This is one of the finished boards. And I've been able to get it so that it can more or less drop in and replace the VES motor controllers. And if you total up the components for this, it comes out to, next slide. Oops, I guess I jumped ahead about, it comes out to about $15 per motor, which means if you're replacing the VES with that, you're talking costs more around $580 or $9.
How much current? How much current do your motors draw?
Come again?
How much current do your motors draw?
That varies at stall. I've seen specs as high as 30 amps. But in practice, it doesn't seem to be drawing that much. I'm also currently undervolting them like crazy. Like you saw that display where it drove me up a hill. That's running at a third of the operating voltage that's supposed to run at.
I would be interested in compare of what does like a Segway draw, you know, its motors, and then also those electronic scooters that people use for handicap mobility.
I can upload to Google Drive and then send to the list the data sheet for the motors, and it has graphs for when you're operating at the full 36 volts in terms of current draw for person during different settings. And then,
Charlie, is this schematic for one controller or four controllers?
This is for the board that I just showed, which is for one motor. And the idea is to reduce the complexity loss and make assembly a lot easier. I'm going to integrate the voltage regulation, battery charging, and motor control, as well as the microcontroller itself, all into one custom PCB that you just hook everything to.
So you're going to put the four of these onto a single board?
Yep. As well as the battery battery management / charger, and the hookups to everything else, as well as the microcontroller doing it. The downside of these boards in comparison to the VES is the fact that you need a whole bunch of pins to drive it. I think it's been a little while since I worked on this, but I think it's somewhere on the order of like 9 to 10 pins per board per motor for those. And you need to do pulse width modulation on a bunch of those. So in terms of the presentation, I ran out of time, so that's what's been neatly packaged. Let's see. Let me try sharing my screen again, because the next part I do not have on a slideshow. So what we have here is the viewer / training data editor that I use, which allows me to see things from the robot's point of view, see what the robot is doing, and also edit training data, because the whole point of this thing is for it to be able to drive itself, right? So this gives a decent inside look into the navigation, as well as the training data and how it works. So on the right, what we see is the view from the robot with some overlays on it, giving information about what the robot's doing and what it sees. On the left, we have a map of the world. And if I say, hey, I want to do run 15, which happened to be a neural network controlled run, it gives a count of the frame as well as the start time when it happened. I can click on that, and if I tab forward just a little bit, it'll look at the GPS reading and mark it on the map of the world. At which point, that makes it real easy for me to zoom in on the world using Mapbox, which has been integrated into this application. And it sticks a little red beacon on where the robot thinks it is at that particular instance in time. And on top of that, I built a navigational grid of this area using satellite maps. Can everyone see the little blue, or everyone that can see my screen share, see the little blue dots and the green?
Yes.
Yeah, you've got blue waypoints with a bunch of green lines joining them together.
So I built a editor for this. In fact, I can fiddle with it if I feel like it. I can move it around. I can add them, delete them. I have some convenience functions, and I didn't have this when I moved, but just recently, this past weekend, I made a GPS grid for most of my neighborhood. And how I did that was by opening up Mapbox and then zooming in and looking at the sidewalk on the satellite imagery. And then constructing this grid using these little editable nodes. And so if I enable it, we're looking at run 15, I can get a track showing that blue line that shows where the robot went that particular run. And what's more than that, I actually have a live feed where as I tab forward, it will update the position, the heading, and where the nav robot is trying to go. Right now I have it set to go from its current position to the swimming pool over here. Now I have not collected any training data in this neighborhood, and it is having some trouble due to that. I mean, it's not perfect normally, but it's having a fair amount of trouble because it's not familiar with some aspects of the sidewalks around here. Most of the training data I collected was in my neighborhood in Lansdale, Pennsylvania, and they had very distinct curbs, which do not appear to be a feature here, as well as just different weather in general.
Why does the robot want to go to the swimming pool?
Because I told it to. I'm not going to switch to camera view right now, but I have a game controller, and one of the buttons that I use to control this thing during testing, and one of the buttons on there is to set the destination for it. And so I click it and it says set destination to pool destination. I've got like 4 of them that I'm using for testing right now in this area. And I set the destination and it sets where it's going to go. And it's using more or less, I think it's either A-star or Dijkstra's algorithm to figure out I think it was A-star, to figure out the optimal GPS route based on its position. And if I tab forward, I know the frame rate's going to be pretty slow, but you can see on the screen to the left of the camera feed is a representation that's more or less like the Google Maps for the robot in terms of where it is. The red line is its past set of positions. The blue line is the line taking from its current position to where it thinks the closest point on the route it's supposed to travel is. And then the green line represents of the route places around it, what it's supposed to travel. And the gray lights represent the sort of inactive parts of the path. So if we go forward here, you can see it knows that it's supposed to go right looking at those images. And what's the neural network is fed is the camera feed and the a GPS feed. So one of the downsides of the current model is it doesn't really have memory. It operates immediately what it sees right now in the GPS history, and that's it. So if it loses sight of where it's going, it can get pretty confused. So right there, you saw it take a turn. It's staying on the sidewalk, and you can see the GPS map updating. I think it's updating about 5 a second, thereabouts. So every 20 or 200 milliseconds or so. And you can see it going along, and you can also see on the map there, if you look on the left, you can see it actually updating the route as it's moving because it's dynamically recomputing that each time it gets a GPS update and where it thinks its current heading is.
Are you using visual cues as well?
This entire thing is fed into a neural network. How this robot operates is by me driving it around and then curating the training data to remove anything that I don't like, and then it trying its darndest to do what I would do in the situation. Like to load another data set. This is my example from this last one was when I was running it to test just to show you guys. This is my data set that is all the manually collected training data that I've got. And you'll notice there's a lot of runs. I think I'm up to like 10,000 or so. All told, I think it's about 12 hours or so of curated training data at about 20 frames a second. So for instance, over here, I was trying to teach it to dodge things. So right here, what I'd do is I'd say, okay, ignore this first part, and then yeah, I think this whole thing has an ignore tag, and then right here I'd say, okay, start paying attention, do what I did, and what I did was dodge the fence, and then get back on the sidewalk. And so that red line there is showing more or less my steering. Now, one of the issues I can run into is humans and robots steer very differently. Humans, or at least I, tend to, okay, notice a problem, overcompensate a little bit, and then correct it out. Whereas the robot is fairly consistent in its steering. It'll make more or less the same decision with the same image. So I actually end up doing smoothing on the outputs that I give to try and get the robot to have a more smooth output. So it's not like, wait, I thought I was supposed to be turning, but he's not turning. And then, oh, I thought I was supposed to be turning, but not that much. Because that confuses it as far as dealing with the actual problems.
In another context, I had a robot where I needed to start pre-steering a little bit ahead of curve, sharper and sharper till the curve itself, and then as I'm coming out, I unsteer and unturn to make it a more smoother tangential curve and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like pre-anticipating and post-anticipating the actual sharpness of the turn.
Yes, and one of the factors I have on this training is I will take into account the computational delay and have it predict not what I did at the exact moment that I saw it, but instead what I did about 20 seconds before, or 200 milliseconds before, because that's about the computational speed that's running at.
Does it have access to the joystick controls that you did?
It has access. It's using the same interface, and that currently, with the current setup, it's normalized between -1 and 1. And so it's literally it's using the exact same steering that I'm doing. This is a skid steer robot in that it just has 4 independent wheels, but I have an interface that everything operates on top, above, which converts it into roughly car style steering. Because the original robots I recorded quite a bit of the training data on was car style steering.
What controller are you using?
Come again?
What controller are you using? Hand controller. Ah, okay. I've used the PS4, which, okay, either way. What software are you using for that?
I wrote it myself.
Oh, okay.
It's SDL for accessing the USB controller. And then it's just my own C++ application taking that. So that's basically where it is right now. It doesn't seem to work that well on terrain that it hasn't seen before. But I do think that if you collect training data in the area that you're working with, it works fairly well. It needs more training data for dodging people and obstacles. And I'm considering trying to switch to a reinforcement learning approach. One of the big issues that I've run into is the electronics part shortage. I'm sure you guys have run into that a fair bit too. But in particular, the control circuit that I use right here to drive the MOSFETs isn't back in stock until November. So I have these breakout boards, and that's it until November. So I'm going to reconfigure the prototype hopefully fairly soon to use the new breakout boards so I can have behavior roughly similar to what I would expect with the final board.
It only goes to about 2 amps, right?
Right, but he can use it to drive the FETs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
that's something we could discuss offline sometime.
I mean, I'd be interested in solutions. This one works, and I've got the parts on order. It's just got to be a little while before they get here. So that's holding up that part of the project. However, they are available if I pay, I think it was about 100 times the current rate. I could get them for about, no, it was $25 each or so rather than a normal $250. So if I wanted to sell out the cash, I can get them sooner from people that basically bought them and held them in anticipation of the shortages. And then Jetson Nanos have also been out of stock. Normally they retail for $60, and instead they've been going in secondary markets for roughly 220 or so. On the plus side, I was able to find a distributor that was selling them, and I have 10 of them on order for, I think it's August. So that's not going to be a bottleneck for too much longer. So are you guys particularly familiar with reinforcement learning?
I am a little bit.
Okay.
I've done some what was called deep learning, and I forgot what the other name part of it that I did a little bit of effort on, but I need to dig into it more.
All right. So for the next step of the project, I think what I'm going to try and do is replicate the design and refine the hardware because having a nice, reliable hardware platform makes recording stuff reliably and having things transfer a heck of a lot easier. Also, having a product is nice. So the brawn part is going to move forward. If anyone wants to help out with that, I'm completely open to that. And then I'm going to work on the brain part. And the idea there is either to collect a ton more imitation learning data where you just drive it around and then curate the data. And rely on the fact that these algorithms work much, much better than what data they're given. Or alternatively, scale up the number of robots quite a bit and try and switch to reinforcement learning, where you have like 10 of these robots running around a field, all collecting training data at the same time by bumping into things and learning not to. So that's what I've been working on. And anyone have any questions?
That's a friend of mine. This little one here. Somewhat similar. Nowhere near the power, nowhere near the range, but you know it's and the intelligence is all offloaded. But playing with similar things.
Well, one of the things I mentioned in an email is I'm trying to build out a fleet of these things, and it's an open source design, so I'd be happy to either build or sell them to anybody to use for their own stuff. As far as I can tell, there's no one else on the market building anything similar in terms of just open source. You can use it for what you think is good. And I'm hoping that if I can get this good enough, among other things, I can take it to golf courses and charge on the order of like $5 a day for it to do food deliveries at the location. I think golf courses might be a good first place to start because it's a relatively simple environment.
What's your GitHub repository?
I have not published yet, but if there's interest, I will. So what do you guys think? Is anyone interested in working with me? Jamie's expressed some interest. I think I'm going to be meeting up to give some dev boards tomorrow.
Yeah, I think I'd be interested, Charlie.
Oh, sweet.
I have 2 Jetson Nanos. I believe they're the 4 gig versions.
Nice. Would you be interested in working with a robot? Should I try and cook up a chassis for you?
Yeah.
All right, sounds good. It'll probably be a month or so. I need to order those parts and get another. What I might do is get the new version with the motherboards, and then, yeah, we'll work it out. Sounds good.
How does it deal with dogs?
How do dogs deal with it? Currently, its obstacle avoidance is not as good as it needs to be, but it is remarkably solid. I had it do a flying backflip, and it just did not care. Didn't even dent it. You could. I'm a little bit worried about damaging the motors when I don't have enough replacements. So I haven't gone full baseball bat on them, but I would not be surprised if you go full baseball bat on this thing and it just shrugs it off. Like the plastic chassis is remarkably solid. Like high density polyethylene, it has very good material toughness and excellent chemical stability, particularly if you use a black variant of it, because the carbon black is very good at resisting photo oxidation. It's also relatively chemical inert. It's the same material that you use on plastic playgrounds. All of those plastic sheets that you see are high density polyethylene. And I went with the expedient of, this is not the heaviest part of my design, so I'm going to go with a cheap, durable material, and then I'm going to use a really thick amount of it because it works, basically. Also, I prefer working with plastic to metals by and large.
How and where are you machining the plastic?
Yeah, this was actually water jet cut. I ordered it, but I'm considering down the line getting a desktop CNC machine, because most of the pieces are small enough that desktop CNC would be able to handle it just fine.
With the baseball bat exercise, the G-forces inside and your connectors and your board mountings and so on might be a concern, as well as the enclosure handling everything.
With the current design, yeah, because the things are pretty much just rattling around there. In general, actually, I don't think it would be, because this is somewhat flexible. So when you hit it, it bends a little bit and then snaps back in a way that metal just wouldn't. Which means that it reduces the G loads inside of it considerably.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm really happy with how the high density polyethylene has turned out. All right. Anyone else interested? Any questions?
I'm interested, but I'm just saturated with everything else I'm involved with.
Trust me, I get it.
Yeah.
Did you think about using ROS?
Yes, but I hated the compilation system, and I was the only person working on this at the time, so I skipped off with a to-do convert to ROS2 somewhere down the line, and it may be getting toward that point.
NASA uses ROS in their space robot.
Yes, I actually arranged for that speaker. Yes, they do. Security-wise, I think ROS2 is supposed to be better. I've heard it said by the people over at, who was it, Caterpillar, that they said that ROS was fine for experimenting, but they like to use other solutions for production, but that ROS2 might be getting to the level where it was usable for production. Internally, what I'm doing is a multi-thread process that's using 0MQ for communication, and I just have my own multi-thread managers.
So do you have any off-board communication when it's operating, or is it just totally autonomous?
Totally autonomous with the game controller. That's how I shut it down. In fact, the short range of the game controller can sometimes be an issue.
Is that Bluetooth?
Yes, I believe so. All right. Well, I suppose that's the end of the presentation. So I'm open to any further questions at any point.
Great. Thank you very much. All right. Show and tells. Anybody have anything for show and tell tonight? Nothing, huh? I've been doing a few things, not so much electronics, doing more some metalworking and stuff like that. But I am working on a presentation of the laser level detector for my sand bony robot. I'll try to get that ready for next month.
That's been what, about a year in development?
At least. And it sits around for several months before I get back to it.
My Python TFT thing I've got working for Raspberry Pi and now also MicroPython, except for fonts, because the packaging code that I wrote that strips out all the comments was stripping out some code in the that affected how the fonts were being displayed. So I was getting the garbage for fonts. But after I get, that's a bunch of regex. So as soon as I fix the regex, the MicroPython should be working. Next thing up is CircuitPython after that.
Well, I'll be interested when you get to the, I forget what the next chip is, that the one that I have on my
You mean the
display. It's a 2914.
you mean the actual TFT?
Yeah, the controller on the TFT.
Yeah, you've got this one, which is the bigger one.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep, that after I get all this other stuff done, then I'll start working on this code.
All right.
Because it should just work at that point. I shouldn't have to play around with the CircuitPython code or the MicroPython. It'll just work. That stuff will just work.
So I have been putting in some things. So I have home automation and I have barn automation, right? So I have a unit out at the horse farm where my wife boards her horse, and I collect some temperatures inside and outside the pump house and up in the hayloft. And that will run for a couple of weeks or a couple of days, and then the Python script running on the Raspberry Pi will freak out somehow and it'll stop running, and it'll take me a few days to recognize that it's not running. So
Did that extra logging help?
No. Well, I haven't put it into the actual running code yet.
Okay.
Do you have some sort of like keep alive or I'm here?
Well, it's the daemon that keeps crashing and we don't know why. So I wrote the daemon code that he's using, but we don't know why the daemon is essentially stopping. And
the daemon only stops once or twice a year. I've got other issues where I'll get into a loop in my code where it's waiting for a reply from the radio, and evidently the radio. So there's a cell phone modem hat for the Raspberry Pi that I use to send data out to the internet, to the cloud. And it's a little buggy, I guess. And I'll send it a command, and I'll wait for the reply, and it'll never show up. I've got some timeouts in a loop that says, if it's been more than so many minutes, assume that it's never going to respond and go into the reset. But so I've got some software issues that's not quite working. But the real issue is I don't know that it's failed because I don't check the temperatures every day to know that it's failed. And so I've just put some code in to monitor its activity. So all my stuff is MQTT based, right? And so I'm subscribing to something that system publishes to, and then if I haven't heard a reply from those topics in a certain amount of time, then I push a notification to my cell phone. And I just got that loaded this past week. Initially, I was getting notifications every few minutes that it wasn't working, but that was a bug that I had to fix. It was working, it just, my detection wasn't working.
And I dealt with this on a couple of different jobs I was at, and back in the days of slow baud type communications, everybody was notorious for attempting 3 times before they gave up that the communication went down or that it froze up. So in other words, if you didn't get anything within a certain defined period of time, you would send your packet again looking for, then you could acknowledge that or what have you. But in other words, kind of trigger it. And sometimes it would be a race condition. A lot of times it would just be loss of signal.
Yeah, I mean, there are parts of my system that I believe are robust, such as the serial interface between the Raspberry Pi and the radio. That's millimeters long. I doubt that there's much interference on that. I more likely suspect that it's the microcode running on the Chinese radio chip that does strange things.
I was just going to suggest that because a lot of guys in the ham world experience the same thing, just general dropouts, signals not broadcast or radio to what have you.
Yep.
And like I said, it's a workaround. It's not a solution, but to attempt it like 3 times or something like that.
I mean, you could just put an automatic reset in there so that periodically it reboot.
Yeah, there are times I've thought
the problem.
There are times I thought it would be nice to have just one of those little digital timers that would give it a power cycle at midnight every night. Turn the power off for 5 minutes or 5 seconds or whatever, 1 minute, and turn it back on. I don't think I want to do that on a Raspberry Pi that's running off an SD card, because I know that it would get corrupted, and having to rebuild the SD card is a real pain. But
you could just actually do a proper shutdown.
Shutdown and a reboot?
Yeah.
Using cron?
That wouldn't necessarily help with the radio, though.
Well, in my experience, resetting the radio, power cycling the radio always works.
Yeah, what some people find is that a lot of times there's a lock that happens or a memory leak or something within the small firmware code of the radios. And so power cycling them a lot of times will clear up whatever condition it got itself into.
Or you get a hold of the source code and see if you can fix it.
I had an issue with the microcontroller once where the I2C module on the microcontroller would crash periodically if I talked too long. So I just turned on and off the module every single time I sent a message, which worked well enough at the time.
Did you say this is a Roblox cellular modem?
I did not say Roblox.
Cheap Chinese cellular modem?
It is. It starts with a Q.
I've seen some pretty egregious behavior with cell modems. I think that even the good Roblox ones sometimes fall down.
Yeah, they have this AT command set, right? Like old modems used to, way back. And the documentation says you send this and you either get okay or error. They don't tell you what the error means. It's just one of the possible options, right? And well, I've found there's a third thing. You don't get anything.
Yeah, I was going to say it's either ACK, NAC, or none.
Yeah,
it's a tri-state for a binary condition.
Right.
But yeah, they call that the attention command set.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, so there's you know, I'm slowly adding code to do recovery of things that I didn't expect it to ever get into. But again, as I say, the real issue is that it may take me a week. You know, it may fail on Monday, and I may not figure out that it's failed until Thursday night or something, and then I have to, when I go out on Friday, log into the Pi and check the logs and see what it's doing and copy down a little bit of, you know, if I can find where it's stuck so that I can update the code. But I should know within 2 hours now by a notification on my cell phone. And I have a similar issue with I have a script that runs on my Linux box. And if for some reason that dies, then I stop. It is subscribing to MQTT topic and logging data to an influx database. But if it dies, I may not find out about it for days. So I added a notification for that if it hasn't been run in 2 hours as well. All right, anybody else have anything they want to show and tell? If not, we can close it up early and
Sounds good. Paul, I'll email you with further details about the robot if you're up for it.
yeah, that'd be good.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good then. Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Copy.
Click the off
Okay,
button.
I'll kill the recording.